So I will turn it over to him and open it up the floor for questions.
Matt, how you doing?
Great. How are you, Joe?
I'm good, thanks. Hey, we've heard a lot of places with players and athletes testing positive for COVID. I guess I would just ask, do you know of any confirmed cases among your players, staff, or even just within the organization in general?
I'll just probably as a matter of function moving forward, I'll probably let Bruce and the PR team, handle those things when they come out. Obviously, we're in a unique situation. We're not there yet. So, but I just think probably heading into it, I'll let them handle those, those confirmations or whenever, when we report and all that.
It's just to be clear, you can't say one way or another, or of no cases at this point.
Yeah, I'm just not saying. I'm just going to let them handle that just to keep me out of it.
Coach, hope you're doing well. Now that everything's kind of wrapped up, what are your big takeaways now looking back at the past few months, maybe anything that stands out to you?
I think the biggest thing is that it's a team I like. I mean, they like to work. They're really competitive. We ended with like a final exam type of a thing, which was, not for anything other than just, kind of bragging rights. And I thought guys took it unbelievably seriously. And I think that's just kind of the way they've handled their business the whole time in a less than ideal situation. It's a team that I like. It's a coaching staff that I like. I like the interaction. We've done everything from mental health and wellness to special teams to guest speakers. And I feel like our guys have shown up every day and been really good about it. So I think that's a really big takeaway, to be quite honest with you, is that, when you have nice chemistry, when guys enjoy working together, and when there's a strong work ethic, you're started off in the right direction.
Coach, I don't know if you want to give anybody any kudos on this call, but who scored the best on that final exam?
I probably sworn to secrecy on that, but I think we had a lot of guys who did really, really well. And, it's a little different. It's different by position, so it's kind of hard to cross reference people. But I think, like I said, the biggest takeaway was that guys, they were competitive. You can't make them take the test, right? It's all voluntary. And, guys were really, had a lot of fun with it. And it was really more like they were testing themselves, challenging themselves. And so I thought that was great. And just the day-to-day interaction, to get on these calls and be on the calls for 2 hours a day. And then for the rookies were on there for between at least 3.5 hours a day, if not longer, sometimes up to 5. I just felt really good about the demeanor of our guys.
Hey, Matt, thanks for doing this again, buddy. You special guests, you said speakers, anyone stand out that was particularly famous or that was funny or better than the rest?
Yeah, we had like position meetings where we invited just different, Hall of Fame type players.
Hired a new mental health doctor.
So when we did those different guest speakers by position, there were some great ones, like Ryan Clark spoke to the defensive backs. I thought he was amazing. Julius Peppers, Brian Urlacher. I mean, just a lot of great guys. I don't want to forget anyone. I think for me, the biggest one for me is we had, Joe Montana came in and talked to the quarterbacks. And, I'm like a little kid listening to that. So, we didn't want, we wanted it to be useful to our guys, if that makes sense. We weren't killing time, but to have guys come in and talk about, what it took for them to be great, how they were great. I think those things were really, really special.
Coach, I was curious if the league has kind of outlined how training camp might look, or I know that they've sent out some things on how the locker room has to be changed, and they've had those guidelines, but has any of that stuff been updated, and how do you think that the team is going to be prepared for that?
Well, so right now there's no there's no further direction, right? So they gave us obviously the tier system and sort of the social distancing and the preliminary guidelines. we're preparing for, the rookies to show up July 21st, injured players and quarterbacks. I think it's the 23rd. And then obviously the veterans on the 28th. So we're preparing for that. But we know that there'll be more, probably more guidelines, more protocols, more best practices as we move forward. I think we have a tremendous team of people. Eddie Levins, leads that as our infection control officer. Sean Padden, Dr. Gritter, Dr. Connor. There's just a Kent Johnson, our director of wellness. Kevin King, our trainer. They have a great team. I think that has been looking for since the very beginning. What are the cutting edge technologies? What are the things that are going to make this as safe and as healthy a place as possible? Mark Hart, being our COO, is always thinking that way. So I think one of the things that I've taken away from, I'm not very involved in those things, but the times I've listened is like, what's best practice now might not be that way in 30 days. And so it's an ever evolving group. That being said, I think when the time comes, whatever the cutting edge technology, whatever the best practices, whatever the safest ways that we can do things, I'm sure that they'll do.
Hey, Coach. I know you're a big analytics-driven guy, so I'm interested in what you make of this growing narrative based on Teddy's 5 starts last year, that he isn't particularly an effective downfield passer. What do you make of that narrative?
So I haven't heard that narrative. I don't really listen, hear those things. Teddy for us is, exactly, what we want. I think that this offense in general, when you look at it in New Orleans, that iteration of it where Joe first learned it is not necessarily a vertical down the field passing game as much as it is a catch and run underneath matchup type passing game. We obviously have the ability to throw the ball downfield. Teddy's got a great arm. I mean, I think I can remember him. I think it was Ted Ginn. He threw like what I would call like a launch route, like 48 yards down the right sideline last year, like to like the 12-yard line against somebody. So he certainly has the arm strength to do it. But, I think, he's done what he's been asked to do. So I think you have to be really careful. I think, analytics are always, a piece of the puzzle, right? It's like, Bill Gates once said, information is the reduction of uncertainty. So it's more information. But there's also, hey, what were you asked to do? I think what you really have to do is go out and look at, can a guy push the ball down the field? So to me, I'm always looking and saying, well, if he threw the ball 52 yards here, 60 yards here, not many guys can throw it further than 60 yards, but then he can do it. So I think one of the great things is one of the strengths of our team is that, Robbie Anderson's a deep play threat. Curtis Samuel is a deep play threat. DJ Moore is a deep play threat. So we feel like we have the power to be able to take advantage of throwing the ball down the field, and we know Teddy can do that. So I think when you look back at, and again, I haven't really studied those things. I've just kind of studied what I've studied. When you look back at those things, understanding, well, he was asked to do these things, but you see examples of, hey, he can get the ball here, he can get the ball there.
Matt, thanks again for doing this. John Harbaugh was on a radio station not too long ago and said something like the protocols as they currently are would be, I think his word was impossible really to do. I know you're not an impossibility guy, you're a possibility guy, but I wonder what as you look at if it's kind of the way it is right now, what would be the most difficult part of holding a training camp? I mean, do you anticipate you guys ever in full pads and hitting? And what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think for us, we have the benefit of being in our stadium that we're playing in. And so a lot of people that have practice facilities might run into more room, more space issues. But we have the ability to go up to the club level, 3 floors, take what we're meeting rooms, and I'm not really super involved in that. Sean and those guys have been looking at hey, taking, from the day it was kind of announced, hey, taking these meeting rooms, turning them into locker rooms, making the locker room really that entire floor, moving our meeting rooms up to the 2nd floor, but I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, whatever it takes, I've learned now over the last couple of months that I can meet really well virtually, right? So if that means guys practice and then they go home and we meet virtually, then we'll do that. Team meetings, if team meetings have to be broadcast to all the different position rooms, we're going to do that. But I do think a real benefit to us is being in the stadium, and Mr. Tepper and Mark Hart and Eddie Levins have been great from day one, saying, hey, whatever space we need to make sure that we're safe and healthy, then we're going to take advantage of those things. So in terms of the other parts of that, there were like the checking in and the monitoring. One of the great things about having Dr. Gritter, I don't know if you guys have gotten to know her, but like she's one of the stars. Like you come to a place and you meet a lot of great people, and she's absolutely fantastic, and she's always on the cutting edge of research and best practices. And so she's informing us of, hey, this is the best way to do this anyway. So I think we've been kind of doing those things, a lot of the temperature checks and all the different things. And like I said earlier, we know that as we get closer to the season, there's probably going to be some different protocols. So I think Eddie and his team are always looking at, hey, what's next? So I think those are things. The last part is the tier system. Hey, this many people, at practice, this many people around the players, and it cuts out a little bit of, you don't want to cut out some of the interns and the people who are getting great opportunities by coming and working at training camp. But at the end of the day, they could have practice. I don't have to be at practice, right? As long as there's players. I mean, what we need is players at practice. Like I can watch from the computer and yell from my office if I have to, as long as the players are at practice, that's what matters. And so I think we'll make whatever changes we need to make. But I think we're thinking about those things ahead of time and just waiting for, hey, what are the final protocols and the final sort of dates?
Matt, when it comes to you implementing your system and installing it, is the timeline been shifted at all? Like, are you further behind than you would have liked because you can't do stuff over Zoom that you want to do in person, or has that timeline shifted at all because of this?
It's a great question. I think it's just a little bit different, right? I think because I think there's benefits. Every development has two sides. There's positive and negatives, right? Like the negative, obviously, is we did not like actually get in and start doing things, like start throwing the ball. So we have a lot of stuff in, but are we good at it? Is it what we're actually going to move towards? There's some natural gravitation in one way or other when you see what guys' strengths are. So we might get to training camp and say, hey, we want to push more in this direction of the offense, push more in this direction of the defense as we get to know our people. So we could be behind in that regard. I think the one thing that we did was we went a lot more in depth. Typically coaches they install, but they're when you're practicing in OTAs, like they're trying to get to the practice, right? And like guys are out at practice. Well, we couldn't do that. So we really had to get into the why. We really had to get into the deep down fundamental reasons why. And, I hadn't worked with Joe Brady before, but one thing about Joe, he's very much like Phil. They believe in kind of teaching from the ground up, like teaching the why, teaching the other side of the ball. So I would say we're maybe a little bit behind in terms of, hey, I don't know what our strengths are. And when you get it, offense and defense isn't just your system, it's your strengths. But I do feel like we're way more advanced in terms of understanding like the total system and the why. And there's a lot more we need to do during training camp. But I said to one of the players the other day, I said, there's plenty of time in training camp. We'll have time, and we'll be a team that we'll try to get better as the season goes on. And just keep getting better and better and better at those core things that we do.
Hey, Matt, Steve Reed from the Associated Press. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Steve?
Good. Hey, one thing I wanted to follow up with, you were very supportive of the players with, taking a stand on racial injustice and all that. I was curious, just wondering, would you consider taking a knee alongside of those guys for the national anthem? Is that something you've thought about? And just wondering, just kind of throwing that out because you've been so supportive in that, and just kind of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think I would consider, first of all, I would consider anything, you know what I mean, as we move forward. I think, I'm supportive of the cause. I'm supportive of the movement. I'm supportive of social justice. I think for me, like, I think every person, whether coach, player, everyone, that'll be a very personal decision for each person. I think it has to be made at the right time for the right reasons for everybody. And so I'll support my players with whatever they do. And then, when the time comes, I'll really, think, deeply about, hey, what's the best thing for me? What's the best way that I can show my support? But make no mistake, I'm definitely supportive. And, I think a lot of this, it's come from the players. So I'll sort of wait and sort of see, what direction they're leaning. And then I, like everyone else, kind of make my decisions.
Matt, I was hoping that you could update us on a couple of the injured players from last season, Graham Gano, K1 and K1 Short specifically, and how they're kind of coming along in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're both they're both really making good progress. I think they're both trending towards being healthy and being ready. Obviously, without having OTAs, I didn't get it. I haven't had a chance really, to see they're working with our people, but all the reports have been that they are both working really hard and making a lot of progress. So I think we feel really good about that.
Hey, Matt, your MO at Baylor and Temple was kind of building back up and inheriting a couple bad situations. Obviously, this is a different type of obstacle, but is there anything from those experiences that will help you in this one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the takeaways, Joe, that I had from those two places were, number one, get the right people on the field. Find the winners and get them on the field. That's an old Bear Bryant, Vince Lombardi thing, right? So, I think we've tried to do that in free agency. We've tried to do that in the draft. So they might be young. They might not be 100% ready yet. They might be growing into something, but it's about finding the right people that are going to do things the way you want them done, and who believe in the same things you believe in. The days of coaching and telling people what to do are over. Like it's about finding people who share the same vision as you, and then letting them go do their thing. So that was the biggest takeaway that I had. And then it was this is going to sound crazy, but it was like, don't cut corners to win. Right? I'm saying, like, now we want to win, in everything, but it's like build this thing the right way, right? Like so in free agency, I thought Marty was disciplined, right? We didn't want to go overspend on somebody who wouldn't be on the team in 2 years. We tried to build it the right way. In the draft, we didn't reach. We sat there and said, hey, which players are going to be great this year, and then in 2 years, and then 3 years. But I'm a way better coach as a result of those. Not many guys have a chance to say they're still a head coach. Certainly not an NFL head coach after having a 1-11 and a 2-10 season. Usually, like, you're a former coach, right? And so I've been able to get through both of those years and still be employed. And I always felt like our best coaching, our best teaching, our best seasons were in those years. So, like, I've tried to take this off season and have the same approach of, all right, because when you're losing, what can you do other than try to find the positives, try to find the places you're getting better, be honest about the negatives, and then teach, right? Just, hey, we lost, but here's what we can do better. So we've tried to take this off season, which turned into a crazy season, and just say, hey, let's teach. And that's why I started off by saying I really liked our team. I like the players. I like the way that they work. I like the way that they interact. This is a team that I can sit there. Someone asked me before, who were some of the best guest speakers this year. Some of the best speakers this year were like Russell Okung. It was, asking a question and Christian McCaffrey giving an answer, or Teddy giving an answer. It was, Trey talking. It was veteran players on our team talking. So I think we've done all the things that I learned in those other two stops.
Hey, Matt, give me a sense for your impressions of Joe evaluating your staff and picking him up as the offensive coordinator, and kind of picturing what you wanted in the offense, and how that's translated now that you've had the spring to work with them, how that's translated to the meeting rooms.
Well, I mean, the reality is that, and I say this because Joe's become a very, very close with me. Like, I'll have no idea really about Joe Brady till we get to the season, right? Like, what I mean? Like, you really can't find out about what it's like to coach with a guy until things go bad. I mean? Like, when when you're getting booed off a field and you're having, all heck is breaking loose, that's when you really find out about people, right? Like, everyone gets along in the off season. Everyone loves everyone in OTAs. You find out about your locker room, you find out about your coaches, you find out about yourself when things go wrong, right? So I firmly believe that. That said, I could be nothing but impressed with Joe Brady for being such a young guy. He is a football grinder. A lot of guys, like, they're just like, they have a system and they're so smart. Joe's a grinder. Like, he's constantly working on football. And I think the players recognize that. The players always know who really works and who doesn't, right? And we ask them to work, so they want to play for people who work. And then I think you take him and you add in Jake Peetz as the quarterback coach, who's another grinder, and then Pat Meyer, who I hadn't worked with before, as the O-line coach, who's just all football. And you start having this staff of guys on offense who love the game. Brian Angelico, and then Frizz Jackson and Jeff Nixon, who came with me. So I think it's a really good offensive staff. And I think the biggest thing that I liked about Joe, the reason why I wanted to hire Joe was, at LSU, he ran a version of the Saints system. As a college coach, I study NFL tape all the time, and obviously them being in the NFC South, but I have so much respect for Sean Payton, their system, their ability to consistently execute and play at the highest of levels. And so you see Joe with his own take, but on something that's really strong fundamentally and sound fundamentally. And so I've liked everything that we've done, but most importantly, I've liked our coaching staff. And then I really like Joe as a guy, the way that he works. If you find guys who will work hard, who are good people, you always have a chance.
Hey, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but you as coaches haven't gone into the stadium yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, not since we left. Yeah, we haven't gone back.
When do you have a date on when you guys will return to the stadium yet?
Yeah, I mean, we probably won't go back until they say the players can come back, right? So,
Okay.
And we've kind of exited the, we're done with the off-season program. We're done with like coaches meetings. We're kind of in like that coaches vacation phase now, where like, I'll text the guy here and there, but we're not having like organized meetings. We've gone and operated as if the training camp starts as the training camp. We've got the dates, we have the schedules, we have everything. Coaches have worked on their own. We've anticipated. I mean, as we've gone along this, we've heard, hey, we could start July 10th. We could start. No, these are all rumors, right? So we've kind of had contingency plans. We're planning like it's like I said, the 21st, 23rd, and 28th. And then if they say we can go back in and start working with the guys on July 4th, then we'll be there July 4th. And if they move it in any way, we'll adjust.
Coach, I was wondering for you, how healthy do you feel like this roster is? Like, what is your expectation? I know you talked about KK and Graham, but the roster as a whole, like, based on what you know now, how healthy do you view it going into training camp?
I literally thought you were going to say, how healthy are you? And I was going to go into this long thing about my left arch, but I'm dead serious. I thought you were going to ask that. I mean, there's guys who have been banged up, right? I mean, KK obviously being a big injury last year, but I've loved just seeing him this offseason, really, I think getting himself healthy and put a lot of time in. I think, like I said, I think Graham's trending in that direction. Football's a game where, like you have to anticipate that some guys are going to be banged up. But I think overall, we're such a young team. You guys might know better. I don't know how many teams are younger than us in the NFL. I don't know, but we're such a young team that I think we're relatively healthy, pretty healthy. And like I said, the guys who aren't, I think they're trending in the right direction.
Hey, Matt, we saw on social media, I think it was last week, that Tish Guerin is no longer with the team. Is that a role that Kent Johnson will continue to be in, or are you going to try to fill that? And how are you kind of going with that with mental health this season?
Yeah, Kent is a completely different. Yeah, he's more like weight room strength, kind of overseeing that stuff. That position, I don't, that's kind of a personnel issue. So I'm not sure how that'll exactly be filled, to be quite honest. I'm sure we'll probably make an announcement at some time if how that's going to move. But yeah, Kent is sort of in a different role. He's more like overseeing certain areas, and obviously the doctors and, oversees some different areas as well.
Both you and now Phil Snow have talked about Jeremy Chinn's versatility and how he can play safety, and also maybe bits of, say, dime linebacker, I think you mentioned after the draft. Is that something where you've seen it done and you sort of have an idea of how exactly you want to use him, or is that more taking a player and just using his skill set as it presents itself?
Well, I think it's both. I mean, I think you see a whole, a lot of people in the NFL call it like a Buffalo nickel. They see, a big safety / nickel player that can go out there. I think when you've been in the NFL for a long time, there's this concept of like, hey, we play base and then we sub to like Buffalo nickel and then down to nickel, then to dime. I think when you're kind of like me coming in from the outside, you're like, well, you're playing what you call sub. You're saying you're substituting in 70% of the time. Isn't that really the base? And why don't you work backwards? The I formation power sets really aren't prevalent in the NFL as much. So I look at it a little bit more the other way. Like that nickel linebacker is really a starter and, working back. So that's kind of my mindset. But that being said, even when I was at the Giants, we played like a 3 safety package. We played it with Will Hill and a bunch of other really good players. So I've seen it done. And I think you certainly see a lot of teams in the NFL doing it. And I think, that's one of the things I talked about, us maybe not being behind, but being different. Like, had we had Jeremy in OTAs, had we had him in like rookie minicamp, we could really say, hey, here's really his skill set. Like the last time I saw him run was the Combine and the Senior Bowl. So I think, to be quite honest, I think like our coaches are going to have to do a great job in training camp of, like there's kind of this old NFL adage of like, hey, get in there, install like your based offense, the way it was installed 20 years ago, and then evolve into what you're really going to do. We're going to have to go in there very targeted about, hey, this is what we're going to do, because we're going to have to adjust from that, right? So we're going to have to adjust to, hey, this is this guy's strength, that guy's strength. So I've seen it done, but I also think we looked at him and said, hey, this is exactly the type of versatile hybrid player that's starting to emerge in the NFL, and we think he can be a special one.
Matt, I know you have a team in place, and you've referred to guys like Eddie and so forth on all the social distancing. What's your gut say about whether this season is going to happen or what it might look like? I mean, what do you think as you read and hear more about COVID and just kind of wonder what your sense is?
I really don't think any of us know. Even 2 weeks ago, I would have said something probably different. And then obviously there's been a lot of things that have happened in the last 2 weeks. I think a lot of things are going to happen after we see like baseball and basketball and all these different things. So, I mean, I really try to because my son asks me that question like every day, like, because he wants the season to happen. Like, so I just try to be very disciplined about like, hey, this is what I know. And as I get new things, I adjust to that, right? But I think, so for me right now, I'm planning on going July 28th, doing stuff at the front door, maybe taking a test. If they want me to take a test, whatever that test looks like, I don't know. Go in, take the test, and I'll start working. And if it means I have to live in the building, I'll live in the building, right? Like whatever that means. If they then change it, I'll change it. But that gives me peace just to say, hey, I'm gonna do this, and then if they change it, but I think I really do believe like we'll know a lot more, in the coming weeks and months. And so for me, like instead of having like 50 schedules laid out, I have one schedule laid out. Like, hey, we're starting on the 21st, the 28th, and if that changes, I'll red pen it. But for right now, like that's the thing that lets me kind of, take a breath, saying, hey, this is what we're doing. I know it might change, but it might not. But I don't know if that makes sense. So that's really how I'm looking at it. But I am trying to pay attention to, sort of, NASCAR and golf and the Premier League. I'm trying to pay attention to all these other sports just to see what happens on their end. But knowing that, when football comes around, it could look way different.
Hey, Coach, Stacey Dales with NFL Network. I'm curious to know what you've learned about Teddy's leadership and how he sort of leads in this weird off season, and then how he processes in this kind of virtual nature without seeing him in person, working with him in person.
Yeah, I mean, I think he'd be the first to tell you, like he doesn't necessarily love the virtual stuff. Like, he's kind of one of those guys. Like, one of the things I loved about him was just watching him. Like, he's the guy that rides the bike to work and, stops and talks to everybody. He's in the locker room. Like, he's that guy, right? And I think having it be virtual, like, I don't know if he loved that. You probably have to ask him, but I would guess he probably didn't necessarily love that. But what I'll say is you see really quickly that he's really, really intelligent in two ways. Football, like I listen to him in meetings because we have meetings where like he'll run the meeting and he'll run the blitz protection meeting, and the level of like, not even detail, but like understanding and reasoning behind it is so high that like when I remember I was with Eli Manning, I used to sit there and listen to everything he would say because he was so intelligent. And you know what? We're coaches. We think we know it, but we don't have to stand back there and get hit. So he has a different set of reasoning than we have. And to hear Teddy, it reminded me of that. It's like it punches you in the face with, wow, that's really, really, really intelligent. You can see how all of a sudden people just stop and kind of listen to him. And I think the second thing is that I think he's great at reading people. Like I think he's doing a great job of figuring out, hey, who on this team can I trust? Who on this, coaching staff can I trust? And, my interactions with him have been awesome. I think he's going to be a guy that our team goes to battle for.
Have you guys had conversations kind of about, the potential of having to quarantine certain players, like a quarterback or anything like that during the season? Is that something that you're having conversations about at this point?
Well, so, the thing that kind of came out about, hey, we might quarantine a quarterback. I'll be full disclosure. Mr. Tepper had said that to me like 3 months ago. And it just more like as we were having conversations, he's like, you're going to have to think about, do you quarantine a quarterback? Do you who calls the plays if Joe gets sick or Phil gets, so I think, we have all along kind of said, hey, let's figure out all these different things. I just can't live in a world of, scenarios. So I love to have contingency plans. So saying, hey, we're going ahead like this. That being said, I think, like I said, I think our ability in that building to spread out and have people not just 6 feet apart, but like 10 feet apart, and like those, you guys have been upstairs on the 3rd floor, like those huge, where people usually go sit and eat, those huge club level areas where they have, speakers come in sometimes, to turn those big areas into like position rooms and, have 20 people in a room that normally holds 200. I think that really is something that's beneficial for us. But like I said, I won't hold out anything. I mean, if it means that, we have to do something to help ourselves. I think the biggest thing that I've said to our team, though, is as we go into this year, it's true every year, but especially the versatility and intelligence are, and when I say intelligence, football intelligence, are premier. Guys who can physically play multiple positions or be used in different ways, and guys who truly understand the system and can play multiple spots, they take on a whole separate life of their own, because it could be a Friday and all of a sudden you're saying, hey, can you go play this position? Guys who can do that, they're going to really have value. So I've said that in not kind of in a motivational way to our guys, like, hey, the more you know, the more you can do, the better off you'll be. But so yeah, we've kicked around a bunch of different ideas. I just, for me, I have to just sit there and kind of say, okay, we're going like this, and then if things change, we'll see what the world looks like in late July.
Hey, Matt, just for clarity, are you guys still planning to use the outdoor practice fields for practice?
Yeah, we haven't said we're not. I mean, we haven't really even had like anything different, like, hey, we're going to go do this. But as far as I know, I mean, like, we've never had a conversation saying, hey, we would not go out there.
When you're talking about the stadium, you're just more logistically with meetings.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, the meetings within the building. Yes, sir.
And then lastly, had you watched much Premier League or NASCAR prior to this? As you said, you wanted to get a look at what they were doing.
I've always been a NASCAR fan. It sometimes surprises people, like, we have Pocono Speedway up in Pennsylvania. We have Dover. So my wife and I have probably in Texas, even we'd go to a race a year in Texas. So I've probably always been a NASCAR fan. I think one of the things for me as a football guy is it's sometimes fun to get away from a sport that's like, and just kind of different. And I've always liked going to the races and feeling the, pace and energy. Since coming here, we've gotten to know some of the people in NASCAR, so it's made it more fun. And I've always been a soccer fan. Now obviously, what was the league that came back first? It's going to escape me right now. I apologize. But we've also done some other things. Like a bunch of us coaches, we each picked a team, and I can't remember if it was the Korean baseball league or Japanese baseball leagues. They all pick teams. They're picking rugby teams or whatever it is. I'm not necessarily involved. They're just kind of saying, hey, this is who I'm a fan of. So I think everyone's craving sports. I've rented UFC fights. Me and my son have stayed up and watched the UFC fight, which I never would have watched before. But I do think in terms of, as we're looking at what sports look like, just seeing, hey, what are the best practices? What are the things that what are the things that are working and not working? Again, how does that relate to me? It's really more, like I said, Eddie, Mark, Sean, but I'm hoping we play. So I'm trying to keep an eye on it too.
Coach, you say you've always been a soccer fan, and obviously now you've got a new, not quite neighbor with Charlotte MLS, but have you shared any team name ideas or color schemes with Tepper and Tom Glick?
No, they haven't asked for my input. So some of the people that are involved with the team, when we were all in the building, would come back and forth, and so they'd have some different names there, strategy coordinators, so I've had a chance to see them, but I'm very excited to see it. And I saw, obviously, it's not quite, they're not going to announce it quite yet, but I plan on being a fan, so I'm excited to see what color, what was it called, a patch? Is that what it's called, or what's it called?
The badge.
The badge. I'm sorry. Yeah. So I'm excited to see the badge and see everything, and I think it'll be really well done.
Coach, what have been your impressions of Tyre Whitehead and the way he can command the defense from the mic spot?
Well, I mean, when you get to know him, he's such a great person, but he's also so serious about his football. And I think anytime you have a guy that's, been playing, I think it's like 6 years, missed one game or something like that. Anybody's been playing that long at that position, and you see him come in and he's starting from ground, level one. One of the hardest things in a changeover is you have guys that have played their position in the NFL for several years. They are an expert, but yet they're not an expert in your system, and they have to sort of start over again, not in terms of a lot of it, but in terms of like, hey, what do we call this? And something that they've been calling this is all of a sudden now called that. And it can be frustrating, especially if they were here last year. They're like, you came in, so why do I have to change what I call it? And but I think all of our guys have been great. But I think when you have, Tahir, he comes in and he's just like, just diligently going through the process. And so what I can't wait for is for our young players to be in the meeting rooms and day to day with guys like him, because you really see the commitment to process. You see the commitment to like learning it from the ground up. But I would say in the virtual meetings, he and many others have been excellent. And that's, again, I wasn't the head coach when he was at Temple. I was just an assistant on the other side of the ball, but he's always been that way. And so I had a great feeling that he would bring a sense of seriousness to us.
Coach, if you do end up playing this season, but completely without fans, so many of the leagues you're speaking of have at least experimented with that or have gone to it entirely. How different will football feel without fans, and how much do you think the on-field experience for players and coaches will change?
I started my career off and I played at Penn State I walked on at Penn State, but I played at Penn State and then coached at Albright College, in front of, 500 fans. There were games at Temple in the early years when we were turning around under Al Golden where we coached in front of, a quarter full, Lincoln Financial Field. I think the one thing, all great teams, I learned this from Andy Reid years ago, all the great teams create their own energy. So I think that comes from our team. It obviously would be different, right? I mean, but at the same time, I think when you have the right chemistry on your team, when you have the right guys on your team, when you have the right sideline, when you have the right other people on the sideline, like, a lot of times in football, there's a lot of other people on the sideline worried about a lot of other things other than what's happening on the field. When you have the right sort of chemistry, I think you have a sideline that can create energy and have a really positive impact. So, I don't know. I guess for me, like, obviously I care about our fans. I want our fans to be there, but if not, I think our players and the people on our team will just have to, pick it up and carry the torch and bring as much energy to home games. And then certainly the same thing that we do when we're on the road, just to bring just as much energy to the road games as well.
Matt, not to keep hitting you with hypotheticals, but the NBA has allowed some players to opt out of their bubble system. Do you think that's something that the NFL should implement in terms of an opt-out for this season? And if one of your players wanted to opt out, what would you say to them?
In terms of the NFL, I really don't know. Like, I don't really even know much about the NBA thing. I saw the one young man not playing that, taking care of his son. So but I don't really even know that too much about that. I think for me, I'll relate it to this, like, even in terms of players saying like, hey, I'm going to go work out here, or, hey, I'm going to get together with these guys, sort of those things. I've said to our players all along, and our coaches, everyone right now should do what's right for their health and the health of their families. And so I don't know what that means for other people. I know what, so like, that's why my coaches aren't in the building right now. Right. Like what, go be with your family right now. Like we can work a lot over this. So if a player had concerns, I mean, everyone has just a different situation, right? Some people have, immune compromised kids. I can't. So for me, I just think that the best way to be a good coach is to always put your players first. And so if anybody has any concerns, number one, I do my best to, alleviate them. Number two, I know we have the right, one thing I know is we have the right people at the Carolina Panthers who are trying to make sure that, we're not just, living up to the policies and protocols, but that we are doing a great job of making sure that we are as safe and healthy as we can be. And then three, always trying to make sure if our players have issues that we try to help them. Right. So I would always support my players and, whatever they're doing that's right for their families.
Just to clarify off of that, if have players come to you and ask it's okay for them to get together and work out, is that something you've had conversations about, like over the next month?
Yeah, I think anytime players have brought that up to me, I've said to them, that's not, I'm not involved in that, right? Like, I don't want to, I don't ever want to put pressure on people. I'm not supposed to put pressure on them. And so those guidelines are, and rules are there for a reason, but I also don't want to put any pressure on people to do things that they're not comfortable with. You know what I mean? So my message has very simply been, do what's right for you and your health. And I say that not in terms of one small scope, but everything, right? Like when it's come down to anything thus far, when the guys, hey, my kid's sick and, I'm going to be late for this thing. I'm saying, do what's right for your family. When coaches call me, I say, do what's right for your family. Like if you don't put, there's plenty of time to do a football practice. There's plenty of time to have football meetings, but if we're the type of organization, everyone says they're family, but if you're the type of organization and the type of team that truly puts family first, then you're going to probably have a greater sense of buy-in, a greater sense of caring. I'll tell you this, like if it comes down to, me doing an extra Zoom call and something, my kids need something, I'm going to put my kids first. And so I want our players and coaches all to do the same thing. So yeah, anytime someone's even brought anything up to me, I've stopped them, kind of just said, hey, you do what's right for you guys. You do what's right for you as a family, as a person, as a man.
Matt, David Newton here. I don't know if you can hear me yet. I had a bad connection, but there was some people, I guess analysts last week, that said they blamed the Panthers for Cam Newton still being unemployed because you guys held on to him for so long. What do you think of that, or what do you say to those people, and why you think Cam's not employed still?
I think for me, I always pride myself on taking. I think for me at this point with Cam, I think we've answered it. I respect him, and I hate to keep, I don't want to say the wrong thing or anything. I have a lot of respect for him, and I think that's been answered.
Hey, Matt, curious, and if I'm overstepping personal boundaries here, I understand, but just curious if you've been tested and if that was something that was recommended for you to do at any point.
No. I did like as part of like my physical, like with my normal, like my doctor's physical, I did like the antibody test, and I didn't have anything. So, which I don't even know. I was reading the research yesterday. It said the antibodies now maybe are going away after, so I don't maybe, but I've been pretty healthy this whole time. And so I don't, and I've adhered to the quarantines, and I got a nice mask. So I try to follow all the protocols.
Is everybody good?
Appreciate you guys. Hope everyone stays healthy.
All right. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
Okay. See y'all later.
Stay safe.
Hey, Bruce, can you hear me? No? Okay, bye.
All right.